So what I'm going to share with you today are more than some personal recollections about teaching in the university. But they also are the byproduct of conversations with fellow instructors, with reading in fields like pedagogy and historical consciousness and these sorts of things. But really the theme that I'm going to be advocating, and one of the things that I've asked you to maybe be thinking about during my opening remarks, is that to replace the scenes of the young children in some of those wonderful slides we just saw with the faces of 19, 20, 21, and 22-year-olds. Because one of the things that I try to do as a history professor is to make my students encounter the world in the context of our course. That we are relentlessly in the present, and I never let my students forget that, especially when we're talking about things like 1613. So I'm going to read some prepared remarks, and I'm going to kind of move in and out in terms of the specificity, and perhaps in our conversation, if you'd like to know more about some of the specific things my students and I are doing, I could fill you in on those details. But this is sort of the broader context here of what we've been trying to do at the university, and in fact is happening in a number of universities and history departments. So the encounters between the Anishinaabe and Champlain in 1613 have had many afterlives since their passing. And that includes, I think we would all agree, our time here today and tomorrow. Yet history students are too infrequently given the opportunity within their history courses to explore these afterlives and to produce their own knowledges and understandings of them. This is certainly changing in university history departments, especially for Canadian historians who are committed to disrupting and challenging the assumptions that a strong majority of our students hold about the present-day relationship between settler and Indigenous cultures. But to do this, I think, is not only to introduce students to as many of the facts of 1613 as we can. Rather, I want to suggest to you is to emphasize the different ways in which the encounters of 1613 came to be known by later generations and what stories they told and continue to tell about them. This is what I mean about the afterlives of the 1613 encounters. For generations, history students in the university have focused on recovering historical knowledge from the past, on knowing, for example, when, how, where, why, and under what conditions the Anishinaabe peoples encountered Samuel Champlain in 1613, what we might call, perhaps, the facts of the encounter. Students are then taught how this encounter as an event relates to broader chronological patterns of change over time, how, for example, the Anishinaabe eventually permitted more incursions from Champlain and others in the years that followed 1613, how the commercial and strategic relations with the French shifted the geopolitics of the 17th and 18th centuries, and how market capitalism and Christianity made their first landfalls in what we now call Canada. And while these narratives about 1613 and their long-term impact have changed over time, right, as our thinking about these encounters has evolved over time, as we've learned new things about them, the structure of how we teach 1613 and other events has not changed very much at all. The focus on the afterlives of 1613 is one way, I think, for us to do just that. So how might this translate into practice? As a history professor, I've become a strong advocate for my students and my own self to be exploring the geography of these afterlives more fully. This geography includes the library and the archive, but it also includes all sorts of other places where stories are told and historical representations made, in the spoken word, in visual arts, in music, in film, at monuments, museums, and designated heritage sites. 1613 and Champlain, as we've already learned here today, are hardly artifacts that we need to salvage from 400 years ago. They remain very much in our everyday lives and cultures, in the stories that we tell ourselves about ourselves, just as they did for peoples throughout the 19th and 20th centuries. I would like to see more university history students experience these encounters, and then be given the opportunity to reflect on what these afterlives of 1613 have been, where they've emerged, for whom, and for what purposes. Students who explore these genealogies, from 1613 through to our own present, might then discover that this distant past is far from being over. Thank you.